Hi, well, it's me, Vicky Marie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this crazy world. Now, in this video, I'm going to read out for you the events of today, Tuesday, the 9th of June, 2026. The trial of the monster dads, the two men who were looking after this little angel, who was only, well, when he went to them, he was only 9 months old. He was a beautiful, bouncing, healthy, smiley, happy baby. And within only 4 months of being in the care, if we could call it that, I think care is probably a loose word, isn't it? The care of these two fathers. And they were in the process of adopting Preston, Jamie Varley, and John Gowan Fazakli, or GF as I'll be calling him. And little Preston was given over to them, and with it, as I say, within a very short 4 months, this baby had suffered over 40 injuries, including a fractured arm. He'd been admitted to hospital 3 times, the third time with breathing difficulties. The third time he did not survive it, the hospital could not save him. He'd been subject to embarrassing photos, videos showing his genitals. I can't even go through it all. I'm sure it'll get mentioned in this video. So they're on trial. And we've heard this trial has gone on for maybe 4 or 5 weeks already. You can't help feel for the jury who's got to sift through all this horrible evidence that's been given about the horrible fate of this little beautiful baby. Just, typical sort of little baby, laughing, happy, just learning to crawl. He had his whole life in front of him, didn't he? Literally. He's hardly had any life whatsoever, this boy. Anyway, then the gruesome twosome got their hands on him, and whatever way this verdict ends up, one thing we do know, he was fine when he went to them, and then within 4 months, he wasn't. Not only he wasn't fine, he was dead. So it's trigger warning as always, because I'm going to go through what happened in the trial today. And you will get angry because it's the defense now summing up. And the defense has to defend. That is their job. But it's irritating to hear them sort of try and excuse these two twonks, isn't it? That's what you'll get. So the thing is, they've got separate defense lawyers, so we will hear from Jamie Varley's defense. I think he's up first, give him his reasons for everything, and then we will hear from John GF's defense. Basically, John is trying to, it seems like it was mainly Jamie Varley, but John GF is trying to say it was all him. He didn't even know what was going on. He's like an innocent bystander in what was happening to his son. Of course, it wasn't his son. He'd only had him 4 months. That's not time enough to start thinking that he's your son or you're his dad. But anyway, so yeah, you probably will get angry. I'll certainly get angry. I'm sure I'll try and stay calm because I just want to tell you what is said. And again, just to apart from the trigger warning, just a reminder that there are no cameras or recording devices allowed in this courtroom. So what I'm reading out to is the Manchester Evening News summary of what happened, but it's only the opinion of whichever journalist was there at the time. Not the opinion, but, they've tried to recount the events as best they can, but there's, a limit. We're only human beings, all of us, even journalists. So, there may be things that sound a bit confusing. But I think generally the Manchester Evening News, to be honest, have done well in covering this trial, because you're reporting third hand, So bear that in mind. I'm then reading it out, so I wasn't there, and I'm reading out what somebody said who was there, but they haven't got tape script or anything like that. So, just be aware of that as well. So the defence, yeah, gosh, a lot of us that have followed this trial for a while and heard all the evidence, or most of the evidence, would say, what possible defence can you give? But it seems to me that the defence generally is, well, certainly for John GF, the defence is he didn't know and he doesn't remember, and he was making a roast dinner when Preston looked like he was in respiratory distress on his cot, etc. These men have got an excuse for everything, a reason for everything. Preston was just a clumsy baby, according to Varley, wasn't he? Just a clumsy baby, just typical clumsy baby. That's why he had all those bruises, injuries to his bottom, fractured arm, videos of him in respiratory distress, leaving him in a bath for 14 minutes on his own, spinning him at the park in something so fast that poor Preston practically lost consciousness, putting Preston into a state of what one doctor called frozen watchfulness, because he was so terrified of Varley. That's Varley for you, the chameleon Varley, who's changed his appearance so much. And then, of course, John GF, his defence really is, oh no, I'm a lovely person, really. I didn't know what Jamie was up to. Jamie's the dramatic one. I didn't have any idea what he was up to. And if I wasn't there, and if I was there, I don't remember. And if I do remember, I was making a roast dinner. And if I wasn't making a roast dinner, I was on my phone talking to work. His excuses are ridiculous. But of course, at the heart of it is this beautiful little boy. And as I say, the thing that we do know for certain, don't need a jury to tell us, he's dead. These are the last photos of this little boy, 13 months old, frozen in time, forever, dying of respiratory distress, that Varley says was nothing to do with him. He left him in the bath while he went and had a shower, and then he nearly drowned he did drown in the bath, according to him, because that baby 100% was dead before it even got to the hospital. Nothing to do with me, says Varley. Oh, it was just an accident. It was an accident. Absolute tosh. Sorry, but it is. Anyway, so I'm already angry. I haven't even read out what the defence had to say yet. So you can be sure that the defence, as I say, is what they're paid to do. Everyone's entitled to a defence. Everyone's innocent till proven guilty in our, advanced society. Sometimes I think we're going backwards in society. So I'm going to start, and I'll just put up different pictures as we go along of the defendants, of Preston, etc. But I'm just going to get on with that. Just want to say thank you to all of you who care, that have been following this along with me, because Preston needs people to care about him, doesn't he? Okay, so it kicked off around 10:38 with the first post. We do not have trial by media or internet clicks, the defence barrister says. So Nick Kennedy is the defence barrister for the defendant Jamie Varley. He begins by asking the jury how they felt when they heard it was a baby murder case involving sex abuse, and describes some of the more shocking allegations made by the prosecution. He says they may ask how someone in all conscience can stand up as he is now and represent Jamie Varley. Yeah, we're all asking that. We're all asking that, Nick. But he says his role is to stick to the facts, not emotions. he says the jury has given hard work and dedication to the case. And he says it's one of the cornerstones of democracy that we do not have trial by media, trial by internet clicks, and even less so mob rule, he says. It's all true what he's saying, but we still don't understand how you can do it, Nick. However, the jury's job is to establish the facts and the true verdict. He asked them never to let emotion cloud their judgment. In order to do your duty, to achieve real justice for our community, whatever the charges, whatever the tragedy of the case, every defendant deserves a true analysis of the evidence. That's all we ask of you, he says. And it's all true what he says, but you know what? Every victim deserves justice as well, don't they? So we mustn't forget that. To me, it's more important to think about the victim. But yeah, it's important we don't have miscarriages of justice. They do happen, not very often, but they do happen. So yeah, it's all correct what he says. You'll remember back in 2023, the provisional cause of death was unascertained, sorry. But since 2025, Dr. Armour and Dr. Gifford's reports, the entire case depends on their interpretations, Mr. Kennedy says. And he says he will begin by looking at the science in this case. He reminds the jury of the burden of proof to establish the facts so that they are sure. And if they are not sure, there is another possibility. If they are not sure, or if there is another possibility, they cannot find a guilty verdict. Well, it is beyond a reasonable doubt, though. You know, there is a reasonable doubt always. He says the evidence of Dr. Armour and Dr. Gifford is central to the case. He suggests on a number of occasions Dr. Armour was too rigid or dogmatic. In reference to the bruise on Preston's throat, he says she suggested the bruise could have occurred indirectly, despite having never seen this once in her 30 years' experience and had never read about it. Just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it isn't so, she said. Of course, it's true. You know, you don't have to be a forensic scientist for that. I've never seen anyone shot in the head, but I know people get shot in the head. I mean, come on. Dr. Gifford said, just because there was no sign of sex abuse doesn't mean it didn't happen, Mr. Kennedy reminds the jury. Now, I don't think that's correct, that there was no sign of sex abuse. There was lots of signs of sex abuse. Even the forensic pathologist for the defense admitted that. But that could be. He wouldn't rule out sex abuse. Anyway, he says this is a courtroom, not a science lesson, and the jury must be sure of the evidence. He then turns to the alternative explanations that it was caused by sex abuse or by the blunt, hard surface of the laryngoscope used in intubation. So that's the defense's case, or part of it, that this bruising on the back of Preston's throat could have been caused by the intubation, despite the fact 3 or maybe even 4 medical experts said no, in their view it wasn't, and even the defense experts said he wouldn't rule it out, but he didn't say it was definitely that. Dr. Aubrey, who carried out the procedure, said she rarely carried it out on infants Preston's age. She did not think she had injured him, but accepted she could have done and not realised it. Of course, let's also remember that Preston was not breathing at the time, so it's unlikely that he could get bruising. Here is evidence from the clinician who did the procedure. Common sense would tell you that's a key consideration. Dr. Armour said it would be unlikely an experienced clinician would carry out this procedure clumsily, but the defence say it is an inherent risk, no matter how careful you are. So basically, he's trying to create reasonable doubt. That's the defence's job always, isn't it? To create the possibility of reasonable doubt. Dr. Armour said there was no circulation when Preston was being worked on. However, Mr. Kennedy says circulation did return, albeit for a short period of time. So this is a bit of a bone of contention, isn't it? Did Preston's circulation, was it restored enough for bruising to occur? But Dr. Armour said blood would go to major areas. Those were extremities compared to the area where the bruising was. He says Dr. Armour's opinion that the throat bruise was too big was a scientific opinion. Mr. Kennedy now reminds the jury of Dr. Crane, a highly experienced pathologist. So he was the defence's pathologist. He was the head pathologist in Northern Ireland. He accepted, he's retired now, of course. He accepted prosecution theories as possible, but he also offered alternative explanations based on the evidence. Mr. Wright doesn't seem to like him, does he? He criticised him under cross-examination. He mocked him yesterday and said he was just dancing on the head of a pin. Well, that is, of course, his job, to discredit the defence experts, like it's his job to discredit the prosecution experts. You know, he's not being very kind to Alison Armour, is he, or the other medical professionals. The prosecution know if you accept Dr. Crane's explanations as reasonable possibilities, their whole case is at a risk of collapsing. Regarding the throat bruise, Dr. Armour said you won't find a throat bruise just from smothering. Something must be pressed against it. Professor Crane said it could have been left in there, particularly with no nails. He also said it could have been caused by the laryngoscope blade. He was clear the cardiac massage and return of circulation would have provided blood flow to the core. There was recent inhalation of food contents and blood in Preston's lungs. Dr. Simmons, a prosecution witness and colleague of Dr. Armour, said these can be the features of a natural death in an infant. He said this should be regarded as a non-specific finding. However, Dr. Armour said there needed to be a cause. However, she agreed a nosebleed could be a cause. In terms of the food contents, Dr. Simmons and Professor Crane said these were consistent with esophageal reflux. It's the esophagus, isn't it? So it's esophageal reflux. Sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing that right. Dr. Armour accepted that if a person was conscious or semi-conscious, the gag reflex could be affected. So there's a lot of talk, wasn't there, about Preston having this reflux. But it just seemed he was always sick. You know, this boy went into these horrible men's care with maybe a bit of reflux issues, and his foster carer did say, you know, he wasn't the best sleeper in the world. But he never had a seizure till he went with them. all this vomit points to medical records from September 2022 and January 2023, which make reference to the diagnosis and medication prescribed to treat the condition. On April 19th, once Preston was living with the defendants, he was taken to the doctor, who noted vomiting, likely gastroesophageal reflux. Dr. Aubrey described having to suction vomit while working on Preston, Mr. Kennedy said. Oh, this poor baby. So, and here we come to it, he said, an important mechanism of acute airways obstruction that doesn't involve SEX abuse, identified by Professor Crane, supported by Dr. Simmons. So, yeah, his job is to discredit what the prosecution put forward was that, in their opinion, that it was caused by SEX abuse or something similar. It's this guy's job to discredit that, isn't it? So it seems the prosecution, according to the defence barrister, have either never understood this mechanism or accepted it exists. They maintain Dr. Armour's explanation chimes with all the other evidence. This is absolutely rooted in the oh gosh, I want to pronounce it in the Spanish way. It's ridiculous. The reason for that, for those of you who don't know, is I speak Spanish. I'm a Spanish teacher, and I want to say esophageal, esophageal, I can't pronounce it, disease. Preston was diagnosed with. He says the cause is collapse followed by aspiration of vomit. How many times have we heard the word vomit in this case? The prosecution say Preston didn't have seizures before he was placed with the defendants, but Mr. Johnson says Preston wasn't growing up and being introduced to cow's milk either. Oh, so it's the cow's milk fault now, is it? He says the defendants were advised that the hospital would have sent him away if he wasn't unconscious. This is reflected in a text message sent by Varley to his partner at a time when he said Preston was having a seizure. Mr. Johnson says this was not an explanation made up in the witness box. Mr. Johnson says there is no evidence. Oh no, there is evidence of Mr. Varley performing rough CPR. I mean, that was so weird, wasn't it? He was doing CPR, but he was pressing his stomach, he said, like a tube of toothpaste. That's not CPR, is it? A nurse rushing him into the hospital with Preston, gripping him and treating him on a hard table. Yeah, it's all the nurse's fault, obviously. He then refers to the injuries to Preston's pelvic organs. He says he does not know what the jury expected, but Dr. Armour's position that there was incontrovertible evidence of injury to Preston's bottom, but she accepted she could not confirm the presence of these injuries with the naked eye. The lack of clear evidence of injuries to the naked eye is the reason further examination under a microscope was necessary, Dr. Armour said. And Mr. Kennedy says the alleged injuries were 1 millimetre or less. Kennedy says the defence pathologist, Dr. Crane, said some of the alleged injuries were more consistent with having been caused during the taking of samples. He said some of the findings were inevitable due to the methods of taking samples. Dr. Gifford's opinions are entirely dependent on the accuracy and reliability of Dr. Armour's interpretation of the slides. Well, actually, so are Dr. Crane's. Because, Dr. Armour, Alison Armour, she was the only one who actually examined Preston physically. All the others are giving their opinions based on, after he died, I mean, all the others are giving their opinions based on her evidence and photos, etc. Mr. Johnson says Dr. Gifford had trouble understanding what Dr. Armour concluded, so she created her own diagrams. Oh my God, the way they're throwing the medical profession under the bus. She said if Preston had the injuries alleged, he would be extremely unwell. Well, he was extremely unwell. He bloody was extremely unwell. He was vomiting every 30 seconds. He was rushed to the hospital 3 times in the space of 4 months, and he had 40 injuries. And he couldn't breathe in the end. So, I don't understand what he's trying to say here. Mr. Johnson said the jigsaw pieces started to fit together in the prosecution evidence. If Dr. Armour's evidence was incontrovertible, their case depends on trust that this could not have happened during the processing of slides for analysis. Dr. Crane, however, said some of the findings were inevitable when taking these types of samples or slides. He said the findings were not unequivocal evidence of sex abuse. Well, he would say, in the words of Christine Keeler in the Profumo scandal, some of you might be too young to remember that. Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? That's exactly. When she was sort of challenged, well, John Profumo had denied all knowledge of ever knowing her because she was a high-class call girl. And John Profumo was an MP, I think, wasn't he? Anyway, he had a high sort of reputation, And so she was challenged. She said, oh, well, Mr. Profumo denies all that. And she said, well, he would, wouldn't he? He would say that, wouldn't he? Mr. Johnson refers to a further internal injury, which Professor Crane said could have been caused by sex abuse, but could also have been caused by the vigorous rubbing of the abdomen as a baby's pelvic organs sit higher above the pelvic bone structure. But you know what? You've got to ask, why was Jamie Varley rubbing his abdomen if he was supposed to be giving him CPR? That's not CPR, is it? In Varley's police interview, he described hitting Preston's back hard and rubbing his belly. We are not looking at the evidence in a vacuum, but being no doubt it is a bedrock, because after Dr. Armour's evidence, they were charged, Mr. Johnson said. So basically what he's trying to say is nobody charged these men, nobody even thought that they could have done anything until Dr. Armour did her forensic pathology and so it's all her fault as well. You will be the judge, but we suggest it will be a strong call on you to reject these alternative explanations out of hand. There you go, that says it all, doesn't it? Dr. Crane was just there. He's not denying that there could have been sex abuse that caused the injuries, but he was there to just say, well, it could have been that, but it could also have been this. Just trying to create a reasonable doubt. I hope the jury aren't falling for it, but you know what? We don't know, do we? We just don't know. But also, we have to remember the jury will have seen the videos. We've heard about them, and it's been shocking enough. We can imagine the scene, but they've actually seen it. They've seen the videos of Preston in distress. So I'm hoping that will mean, that they will see through these lies. I hope so, anyway. So we're back in court, and Mr. Johnson is now moving to the joint allegation. The defendants sex assaulted Preston on July 23rd. He says this is the sort of allegation where if the jury was sure it would affect their view of the rest of the case. This is not a case where there is a difference of opinion, he says. This is a very specific charge. He suggests there is a fundamental difficulty in the analysis by the scientists, which does not specify the source of DNA on Preston's cot. He says DNA can be transferred through various direct and indirect mechanisms, including through shared laundry. Yeah, well, okay. We suggest the prosecution case has to either ignore or sidestep that scientific option, Mr. Johnson says. He says that the only DNA found on swabs taken from Preston after he died was his own. Experts said the findings on the cot were not helpful in determining whether sex activity had taken place and could be considered neutral. I mean, it just seems to me that if you find SEMEN on a cot, how could you find it in a cot? Unless, it wouldn't be a very good washing machine, would it? If it couldn't, if it transferred SEMEN from one sort of article of clothing onto the cot sheet or whatever. I don't know. But that's what he says. This is going to upset me. I know it is. This is a little boy who dribbled and went to sleep in very, very strange places. Oh, did he now? Did he, when he was with his foster mom, did he dribble so much? Remember the photo? There was all dribble in his mouth, and I think there was an insinuation that maybe by the prosecution that maybe it wasn't dribble in Preston's mouth, it was something else completely. Again, we haven't seen those photos, probably a blessing for us. We haven't seen them, but the jury has seen them. That's Preston, according to one of the doctors, looked like he needed resuscitating with blue lips, dribble coming out of his mouth or something coming out of his mouth. I just can't go there. Apparently, the dribble was seen in previous photos of Preston playing. We know also as a little boy who went to sleep in very strange places, as seen in other photos, and he would stand up in his cot holding a cot, which most babies do, don't they, when they find the feet, holding onto the rail. But wasn't it, he had his head hanging over the rail, his lips were blue. Is that normal? Yeah, is that normal for a baby? He's a little boy who would fight sleep until they couldn't fight it anymore, Mr. Johnson said. Now, I had a niece who was like that. She would literally fight sleep. But tell you what, she was never hanging over a cot like that. She used to sometimes fall asleep standing up in the car. She wasn't a baby, though. Do you know what I mean? She was by then maybe 4 or something. I think what they talk about Preston as if he's much older, don't you think? They describe him as a toddler. He wasn't a toddler. He was a baby. He was 13 months old. He wasn't walking yet. And some babies do walk early, but he wasn't walking. He was only just crawling. Varley said that. If you remain horrified that he was left in that position for 3 minutes, as any parent would be, then you convict him of neglect. He's definitely going to get neglect. It's the other things, whether he'll get found guilty of, the more serious things. I mean, neglect's serious enough, to be fair. Mr. Johnson now turns to the issue of dark thoughts reported by Varley. He says it's recognised that Varley found it difficult to adjust to parenthood and isolation from his partner. Because remember, Varley, head of year teacher at private school, decided to take a year off so he could look after Preston. But I do think that was a bad idea because, you know, Varley, I mean, he's in his late 30s. So he'd got to an age, mid to late 30s. He got to an age where he's used to doing whatever he wants. And babies are a culture shock. You know, if you've been used to going out and, you know, him and John obviously had a social life, they had money and, you know, disposable income, etc. And then suddenly he's at home all the time with the baby. I think it's definitely true that Varley grew to resent Preston. Just do not know why they ever decided to get a baby unless it was to abuse it. So Rebecca Warhurst and Darius Drop, who visited from his workplace, did not have concerns after seeing him. The social workers agreed to Mr. Varley's mother babysitting in order for the couple to go out together on a date. Yeah, brilliant. But let's not forget, this is a couple. So there's two of them. They've got Varley's mum up the road. They've got friends. They've got the social workers. I mean, they've only just adopted Preston. So the social workers, hopefully, you know, are paying close attention. You know, making out as if it's a difficult job. Don't have a baby. You chose to have a baby. You chose to adopt this beautiful baby that anyone would have been grateful to have. You chose it. And if you couldn't cope with it, you should have told the social worker and let somebody else have him who would love him. He says there are competing propositions, amongst which Janet G., a colleague, said that during a visit in July, Mr. Varley reported dark thoughts. Of course, he's saying she's lying about that or he doesn't remember it. So Mr. Johnson asked the jury to put themselves in Mrs. G's position. A colleague comes to you with a baby, with his arm in plaster, and says he has dark thoughts about drowning or suffocating the baby. Surely the first thing you would do would be to contact someone. Well, I agree with him there. I don't know why she didn't. Even if it was Mr. GF, and say you were worried, and even if not, when 10 days later the baby died, reported as drowning, you would call the police. But Mrs. G or Miss G reported nothing of the dark thoughts until August the following year. Now, that is a long time not to say anything. She told the court her first police statement was only around the issue of text messages, but Mr. Johnson said she had discussed Mr. Varley with colleagues. Oh, we're not suggesting she has lied on oath. Yeah, you are. But just that in the 2 years, she has muddled parts of the conversation with Mr. Varley. It's that recollections may vary, isn't it? She did wait a long time before she said that, so we've got to give him that. Another witness said she had spoken to John Cartmel, who said something about dark thoughts, but said there were so many people saying so many things, it was hard to remember who said what. Psychologically, we want to make it to make sense, Mr. Johnson says, forgetting the dark thoughts referred to his sister. Varley said it was a quick conversation about feeling like a failure and about students who had children young. And GF, while critical of his partner, also recalled having a conversation about intruding well following the birth of her children. God. I hope he's never left with her babies. Anyway. Because it seems like he had a lot of nieces and nephews, but then later they say he had no experience with babies. He must have had some experience. Anyway, if he had no experience with babies, why did he adopt one? Why was he allowed to adopt one? this is something that they're going to bring up shortly. That neither of them had experience with babies. Well, how were they allowed to have a baby then? Somebody answer me that. Adopt a baby. I mean, thing is, anyone can have a baby if they're fertile enough and they can, and lots of, when your first baby, you haven't got any experience with babies normally, unless you have done a lot of babysitting and things when you've been younger. And then that's what social workers are for, and help manuals, and I don't know, your district nurse or whoever comes round to see you. I mean, normally you don't just have a baby, whether you've adopted one or had it naturally. You don't just adopt it and that's it. Nobody ever comes to the help. There is help there. You have to take it, of course. But to me, when you adopt a baby, how do you allow two men, whatever you think about same-sex relationships, this is two men with no experience. So even if it was a man and a woman with no experience of having a baby, you would keep a close eye on them, wouldn't you? You mean you don't? I'm trying to think of an example. You don't, even if you get a dog, you have to look after it properly. How can you just? Oh, do you know what? Let's have a baby. Let's have a baby. Oh, have you got any experience with babies? No, but I just fancied having a baby because it'll, it's fashionable, isn't it, for a gay couple to have a baby? So why can't we have one like all the other gay couples? You just feel, and I honestly think, and I've seen some gay couples who have babies comment on this case, and they say they are the ultra, because they maybe haven't had any experience with babies, or because they're a gay couple and they know they're under the spotlight, etc., they are especially careful with everything. Well, not Varley, he didn't give a shit. I'll leave him in the bath for 14 minutes. I don't care. It wasn't trying harder. He was doing less, wasn't he? Because he didn't care. Honestly, that's how it feels to me. He did not care about Preston's welfare. He only cared about his partner, and that worked both ways. And he used Preston to make his partner jealous, or to get to him when he was at work and he thought he was up to something. Or, Preston wasn't there for his own. For Preston, surely when you adopt a baby, it's because you want to give that baby a better life as well. I don't think you ever really have a baby because you want to give the baby a better life or a good life. You have a baby normally because you want to be a mum or a dad. But surely if you adopt a baby, there would be part of you that would want to give that baby a break, not think of it in foster care or in the care system. But I don't get any feeling that Vala cared anything about Preston's welfare. So he then turns to the issue of good character. He is more likely to be telling the truth and less likely to have committed the offences because he's got no previous convictions, not even a parking ticket, remember? And he has positive good character as head of year at a school. Yes, because, teachers never do any of these terrible things, do they? One of the major problems for the prosecution in this case is the high positive regard of people who came into contact with him in March, April, May, June, July. His very job was to spot red flags and safeguarding. Well, they didn't have a clue, did they? Thing is, people get taken in by or she is, or any of those things. Oh, she's a doctor, or, but bad people are in every walks of life. And sometimes there's more bad people in those kind of professions, especially like teaching, sadly, because if you're interested in children in an sex way, What better thing to do than become a teacher at school? One of the major problems for the prosecution, oh, sorry, I'm repeating it. He would have had to be a very sophisticated criminal to pull the wool over their eyes. Sophisticated criminal. There's no evidence to suspect those a foster carer with 27 years experience, said the house was beautiful and had no concerns in the early days. Yeah, it probably all started off great. And Vicky Reader, a social worker who visited weekly, said Mr. Varley was devastated when Preston suffered an injury to his arm and said it was lovely to see the joy in the family. Amy Shepherdson said Jamie and John were taking on full love of Preston, never shied away from professionals. Colleagues described Mr. Varley as wanting the best for the children at school and that they clearly loved and cared for Preston. Mr. Johnson says this is a stark picture compared to the one the prosecution painted. They say the writing was on the wall, writ large. The only writing on the wall was a stencil he painted saying Preston Elijah. He's so childish, Jamie. Sorry, I just think he's just a big kid, isn't he? He'd do that for show. He says you cannot empty a tube of Smarties, put the red ones back in and say, look, there's a tube of red Smarties. So this is the best he can come up with. You can't empty a tube of Smarties, put the red ones back in and say, look, there's a tube of red Smarties. Okay, that's not working. Well, not for me anyway. I hope we'll find out what the jury thinks of it. It is clear that neither defendant had a lot of prior experience with young babies, if any, and of course they had not had Preston from birth. No adjustment. You may have the view Mr. Varley plainly thought some of his actions were age appropriate, when it is plain they were not. The swings, the prams, the spinning toys. Yeah, they treated Preston as if he was about 4. Pushing a pram down a rocky path. That's the first time I've heard about that. Yet he happily shares those moments with his mum and John. And why did his mum not say anything, I wonder? Are those the actions of a man who is harming a child, or more a man who thinks this is appropriate, rather than, as we can all see, that these activities actually are too old for him? He just didn't care. And he did those activities to teach John a lesson. Those photos and videos always seemed to be when John there, and like not only not there, he was just attention seeking. He says Mr. Varley deeply regrets some of the videos, the Moana being kept awake video, being alone in the bath. He says he is ashamed, but he wanted Preston to learn to self-soothe and tire himself out. What, at 13 months old? Oh my God. It's just cojones. He's only ashamed because he's been caught. He carried on doing it and carried on doing it. Anyway, in terms of the alleged indecent images, the jury can find the images are indecent regardless of whether Mr. Varley got a kick out of them. Of course, you will bear in mind a father-son relationship. It wasn't a father-son relationship. We suggest there is ample evidence Varley had no sex interest behind recording those images. What all those? Pooing in the bath. He says Dr. Gifford agreed it was appropriate for a child to be naked at times. Of course it is. And Mr. Varley could be heard distracting him in clips. Well, of course it is. Of course children are going to be naked at times. You don't take photos and videos of them playing with themselves and focusing in on their genitals so that you'll have something funny to show them when they're 18. Mr. Johnson also reminds the jury that Mr. Varley was dramatic and prone to over-exaggerated language. And the other thing is, I would suggest that even if with it, maybe your biological child, you might be a bit more free and easy with them wandering around naked. Or I think if you were adopting a child, you would be so, you would be very conscious, especially 4 months in. You would be very conscious of not doing anything that could be construed as, you'd be almost the other extreme, wouldn't you? You'd be a bit prudish about it because you wouldn't want it to look like that. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like it wouldn't feel appropriate with a baby that you've adopted and you've only had a couple of months. You wouldn't be in that comfortable stage yet of when your kids are young, you do feel comfortable, maybe being naked around them or them being naked around you. But that I tell you, that changes pretty quick, doesn't it? That and that's with biological children. I'm just not sure about this. I just cannot understand why he was so fixated on nudity with him. So he reminds the jury that Varley is dramatic and prone to over-exaggerated language. He was snap happy and he sent some of the pictures to others. Bear in mind he kept them on his phone. Would you do that if you got an sex kick from them? Yeah, you would, because you wouldn't think anyone was ever going to see him. He says the photos capture every moment, from preparing for Preston, decorations in his room, drawing pictures to his birth mum, etc. I do think it's true that Varley was snap happy. He's one. A lot of people like that nowadays. They take photos of everything. Bloody hell! It's like they sort of, I don't know, just look at something and take a photo of it. If the images were deliberately indecent or trophy photos, why keep them? Now, he did delete quite a few, let's not forget. He left his phone on the bed when Preston was taken to hospital. He never tried to get rid of it. Why did he leave his phone on the bed, I wonder? That seems stranger to me than anything. You're taking your child to the hospital, you would take your phone just in case you had to contact anyone. It seems strange to me he left his phone on the bed, to be honest. He shared some with his mum. None of the photos of Preston were put in his vault where he kept sex pictures. So he did have a vault where he kept sex pictures, but no pictures of Preston were in there. I do think more we'll see what happens after this trial and the verdict is reached. I do just feel there's more to this somehow that's going to come out, but it depend on the verdict. So Mr. Johnson refers to the video of Preston with breathing difficulties at 4:45 p.m. on the night he died. And Miss Dr. Gifford agreed that it might be advised to record a child who had febrile convulsions, and that could influence the parent's treatment. A colleague who had experience with child episodes and advised Mr. Varley to do the same. Yeah, well, you know what? Feel sorry for the jury that's got to pick through all this and decide what is true and what is false. When is Varley telling the truth, and when isn't he? The jury's, shame for them. It's be hard. Be hard work coming to a verdict here, I think. But they've got to do it, and they will do it. Just hope it's the right one. But Uh, so where are we now? So Johnson turns now to the events told by Mr. Varley about the bath incident. He reminds the jury that people's recollection varies. For example, if you're asked to recall a football match, even if they are convinced some of it is a lie, people lie for different reasons, not always guilt, but things like fear. The prosecution sets out alleged differences. He refers to a nurse who carried Preston into hospital and said she did not do any CPR till Preston was on the table. However, a paramedic said she was definitely doing CPR as she carried Preston in. He uses this as an example of where people's recollections can differ, and they can. They certainly can. We suggest that when it comes to the essential features, Mr. V has in fact been remarkably consistent over time, from that first account given to his later recorded interview. His account finds support in the evidence of John G.F., a man who has apparently recently doubted Mr. Varley's account. But despite that, he says, I got home, threw a nappy in the outside bin. I could tell Jamie had not appreciated he'd accidentally locked me out. He said Jamie was very distressed and the place stank of sick. It seemed that Preston had recently had a bath. Then he said his head seemed dry, but his hair was tight. He said, what does that mean? He said Jamie Varley was pushing on his abdomen and hitting his back in an attempt at CPR. I mean, that's just not true, is it? You do not push on someone's abdomen and hit someone's back to do CPR. That's to get them to regurgitate, isn't it? He was asked about timing, Mr. Varley, and asked what he was doing in the times his phone was out of use. If Mr. Varley was a sophisticated criminal, wouldn't you expect him to come up with a sophisticated account, not say he was pottering around and had a nap at some point? What about no water in the lungs? Varley said from the start that Preston was partially submerged. The prosecution says water going into the stomach but not the lungs is a physiological mystery, but forget about the gag reflex. The prosecution has never provided a satisfactory answer as to why the bath seat is in the sink if there was no bath. All they can point to is the sponge on the tap, saying that if he'd thrown it in, it wouldn't have been there. They say his behaviour at hospital was a complete charade. Please think of how different people react to trauma differently, especially if they felt responsible. And of course he did. He said it was he effing killed him. It was his fault. He was going to hell. Varley said all that himself. Imagine being interviewed by the police after an event like that. Might you forget one or two details? No. Might you use a different phrase at the time? I don't think you'd forget any details. Referring to the elbow injury, Mr. Johnson asked the jury to give less weight to the report of Dr. Elbow. It's ironic that you couldn't make this show up, could you? Who said Mr. Varley said it had happened when putting him in the car seat. He said the letter contained a number of errors and had been written after seeing multiple patients that day. So it's Dr. Elbow's fault as well. It's Dr. Elbow's fault, isn't it? He's got it wrong. This is so like Erin Patterson as well. That's what she said, wasn't it, in her long testimony? Everything that other people said that conflicted with what she said, she either said that they were wrong, they were mistaken, or they were lying, or she didn't remember. He says if this would have been deliberate, he would want to get his story straight. Why would he suddenly change from talking about the cot to the car? He also suggests cot, pronounced without the T, sounds like car. Car, the cot, in the car. Maybe. So, yeah, that's right. They tried to say that Dr. Elbow, there'd been a problem with the language barrier and misheard. Bruises. We know Preston had a squint and was an active little boy, learning to crawl with lots of toys. The prosecution said there were no bruises while Preston was with his foster carers, but Mr. Johnson says he was not learning to crawl then. Oh, come on. Preston had survived in the past and come back quickly. I do think this is important. I think this had happened before and Preston had survived. And so Jamie was thinking, oh, he even said, didn't he, he'd bounce back like he had before. If you're not sure of the blocking of airways and SEX assault, the other evidence takes on a wholly different complexion, Mr. Johnson says. For murder and manslaughter, the prosecution need to prove Mr. Varley carried out a deliberate act, not a failure to act. It's not an omission, like, for example, gross negligence manslaughter. Johnson says Varley's not charged with any offence of omission and has no control over what he was charged with. It is not suggested that his intention was to kill or cause really serious harm. The proposition is the intent was sexual gratification. However, the jury must consider if it is virtually certain what he did would cause really serious harm, and Mr. Varley could foresee that it was virtually certain. Mr. Varley may not have foreseen. Preston in the past had survived and come back quickly. He was told febrile fits would not be considered serious unless they were longer than 5 minutes. His friend advised him to record them and referred to them as seizures. Well, do you know what? He was on that bed for over an hour breathing his last. So where's the 5 minutes come in? In his mind, he recovered. They both had plans for the future. Bigger house, bigger school, better schools. Yeah, but Preston was getting in the way of their plans, I think, by now. So Johnson says, we say this prosecution rests on a theory including expert evidence, which they have stuck to the bitter end. A scientific case, we say, has been fatally undermined by Professor Crane, that other explanations are reasonably possible, and the remaining evidence contains weaknesses. This will always be a deeply tragic, shocking case, and we cannot bring Preston back. It would be even more tragic if a victim of previous good character, who you are not sure of on the evidence, found you were filling the gap with emotion. Oh, talk about emotional blackmail to the jury. They broke for lunch then, and then after the lunch break, Anne White, KC, who is the barrister for John GF, spoke. Now, I think like the defences are different, aren't they? You know, I think the defence for John FG, or whatever his name is, they're trying to say he didn't know about all this. So she says, let's put a picture of him up because we're going to be talking about him now. So this is the other partner, the other monster dad or adoptive dad. There he is at Blackpool Tower. Well, with Blackpool Tower in the background. He's got a very false smile, I think. You know, and the more I've seen him being interviewed, and the more I hear, like when the prosecution was cross-examining him and when he challenged him on something, John GF just went, okay, like that, you know. Just odd, isn't it? He's an odd guy. And looking at that photo, look at that cheesy smile. It doesn't look fake to me, that smile somehow. Anyway, there you go. That's just how I feel. And I'm not on the jury, luckily for him. So, Miss White, says it's clear one of the defendants put their trust in the other. She says she's not here to prove anything about Mr. Varley. That is the job of the prosecution. However, it's clear that he did keep information from his partner of the case in the police interviews, and in one case in the courtroom at the same time as the jury. For example, he said he had no recollection of recording the video at 4:45 on the day that Preston had died. GF said he thought Preston could have died from secondary drowning or complications of a chest infection. You must, if you trust and love someone, you are the last person to suspect them. However, slowly, after the post-mortem information became available, here in court, everything has been centralised and brought together. An impressive sequence of events on a jury iPad. Agreed facts making whole something that was previously piecemeal. It's like a jigsaw, Miss White says. Mr. GF did not have all the pieces of the jigsaw. Some were not even in the box, she says. So Mr. GF trusted healthcare professionals and he believed his home was a place of safety. He is a quiet, decent, caring man. He wants to know the truth. If he didn't see all those pieces of the jigsaw before, it isn't because he wanted Preston to come to harm or didn't care if he came to harm. It's because he trusted his partner and what doctors were saying. Trust is a big deal in this case. I did not question his devotion or love for Preston, Mr. GF said. So Varley was a teacher, safeguarding training and experienced with children. Miss White says there was sheer delight at the arrival of Preston. GF trusted healthcare professionals and social workers, but there is not one scrap of evidence that he sought to hide any of it. Things that were not obvious to doctors, nurses, health visitors, social workers, experienced family members. Bruising was questioned once, but never raised as safeguarding. How should he have known that how any of that bruising was inflicted? You were told yesterday Mr. GF was fully equipped to know that Preston was at risk of upper airway occlusion. May 25th, Mr. GF was at work and wholly reliant on what he was told. Chest infection. June 15, a video he'd never seen and he was not at home when the collapse occurred. It's a bit rich in a case of this gravity and magnitude to put that on someone in those circumstances. That brings us back to a different trust, the trust we place in you as a jury. Playing the jury now. You have to be on your guard and we have to trust you to be on your guard, not to fall on prejudicial rhetoric, but to look at the evidence coolly. Yeah, well, they have seen all the evidence. They've seen the videos, they've heard everything. Please don't think I lose sight at any time of the grim tragedy and the fact a little boy has died in what appear to be unexplained and tragic circumstances, White says. You promised to try the evidence according to the evidence. It's not good enough to find someone guilty by association. It's not good enough to find someone guilty because in hindsight they exercised poor judgment. At times, the prosecution has overstated the evidence and used hindsight in a really unrealistic way. I don't criticise the investigation. It's important no stone is unturned. When it comes to the SEX allegations, the prosecution has minced their words and has not said precisely what happened in the bedroom, White says. We don't convict people on hints and innuendo. We convict on evidence, so we are sure. Well, yes, there's quite a lot of evidence, actually, isn't there? I think it's wrong of her to say, yeah, I understand why she's doing it. You know, defenders are going to defend. That's the way it is. Yourself in the defendant's shoes. Try and see things from his point of view, not just the prosecution. Imagine what it must be like to be in front of 12 strangers. Look, sorry, I'm starting to get. No, am I supposed to feel? Imagine what it must be like to be in front of 12 strangers, a person who's never been in trouble, never arrested or committed a criminal offence. What must it be like to learn your partner apparently had told someone they had thoughts of drowning or suffocating your child in circumstances where there could have been a near miss drowning or smothering? Well, we're supposed to feel sorry for John GF now. Oh my God. Get the violins out. Really? Really? No one's get. Oh, imagine what it must be like to be in front of 12 strangers. Well, do you know what? Imagine what it must be like to be a little baby at the mercy in your, where in your home where you're supposed to be safe, in your cot, at the mercy of two deranged psychopaths. Imagine that. Imagine what that must be like. And well, what would you choose? Oh God, oh, I don't want to be in front of 12 strangers. Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, I knew I would get angry in the end. Anyway, you don't have to go for an all or nothing approach. Nothing is binary in this case. Each issue is on its merits, Miss White says. There is no gold standard of parenting. It's a steep learning curve and a rocky road for the best parents. It is difficult, and you are in the dark most of the time just hoping for the best, especially with the first child. But you know, we've all had to do it. Some of us have had to do it on our own with no other support because we're in a foreign country. You know, they had support from the social workers, from parents, from each other. You know, they were lucky. They were so lucky. Unlike the natural parents, he did not have 13 months' experience. He had 4, included. He only had 4 months' experience, and look what happened to that baby in those 4 months. Oh, poor John GF, he only had 4 months. In that 4 months, Preston got 40 injuries, 3 hospital admissions, fractured arm. Oh, but poor John. So during those 4, he was often at work or Preston was often asleep. He had no real experience, no reason to mistrust Mr. Varley. No one telling him that a cluster of bruises is indicative of abuse, but one on the forehead is not. A bruise on the shin is okay, but one on the thigh is not. Yeah. Yeah, but he never questioned. He didn't care. He didn't care. He couldn't wait to get out to work at most of the time. The prosecution has given disproportionate, White said. Failing to chastise his partner for issues may not have been neglect. It could be a warning to keep the peace or be overtaken by other things. So you have to focus on the link between what was happening that he knew about and what killed Preston Davey. These men killed him, that's what happened. You have seen him in the throes of his final moments with Preston, quiet, calm. Yeah, he's a psychopath. His manner and words are genuinely sincere. He plainly had no inkling something sinister had happened. Well, I saw him being interviewed by the police, and I thought he was babbling, making things up. He came over as unsincere and, frankly, quite creepy. The child cruelty counts invite you to consider where he has allowed Preston to come to harm. You must determine whether by July 27 he knew there was a significant risk and he foresaw or ought to have foreseen the circumstances in which Jamie Varley would commit that crime. There has to be a connection between what he is supposed to have known and what happened. That's the test you have to keep in mind at all stages when considering the case against him. Until you decide the circumstances in which Preston died, you cannot decide if GF is guilty of count 5, which is allowing death. Even if you think he should have done something about the Moana video or elbow injury, how would those equip him with precisely the circumstances in which Preston died? You can only convict him if you are sure Mr. Varley unlawfully killed Preston. There is a disagreement between the experts. She then gives an alternative example of a couple known to social services where alcohol and drugs are concerned, where appointments are cancelled and abuse escalates while the parent does nothing. She describes deliberate violent acts after alcohol, where a mother does not remove the child. We are a very long way from that. There's no suggestion John GF ever saw Mr. Varley lay a finger on Preston. He said to this day he doesn't know what happened. Dr. Armour put forward 2 explanations: smothering. There's no suggestion the defendant ever saw anything like that. Or an object being forced in his mouth. Again, no evidence he saw that, according to the defence. She discusses agreed facts about Preston's admission to hospital with respiratory conditions. 2 experts came to different conclusions about what happened when Preston was taken to hospital in May. GF was at work when he was taken in. One doctor thought he had a chest infection and told the defendant. Another formed a different view there could have been infection as a cause. 2 experts came to different conclusions in a context where that man is expected to have known the cause. Only one person can tell you what happened on July the 27th. GF was not there and he didn't know. That afternoon when he was in touch about the house move and kayaks, not a word was said. By 16:45, when something was very wrong, not a word. He only heard about the video in the police interview. Not a word on the drive home. That is agreed by everyone. I don't agree. I think they probably did talk about it, but anyway. As I say, I do feel sorry for this jury. They've got to unpick it all. Clearly I'm thinking both of them are as guilty as each other at the moment, but it doesn't matter what I think. That's just my opinion. And maybe some of you have a different opinion. Why, which is fine because let's not forget the jury. They're people like us. Juries are made up of normal people. Everyday people who take, some people are more opinionated like me. I am opinionated. I'd be the first to admit it. I'm not going to change now. I'm too old. But that's just the way I am. And I do operate very strongly on sort of gut instinct. I've learned over my long life I'm normally right with what I think. So I am opinionated. Other people will be more, it could be, and the jury will be representative of all these different types of people. People who are more forceful with their views, people who are a bit more easily swayed, jurors can sway other jurors. Or it might, as I say, they've seen everything, so it may be clear from everything they've seen, their decision may be already made, but anyway. So why on earth was he not told, I think he's having another seizure? Whatever the answer is, it exonerates Mr. GF. He did not know. And what are the signs that he should have added up? Bruising, the elbow injury, parenting on the video that was too rough. By what date should he have known? If you cannot find one, you cannot convict. It's agreed none of the bruises were visible when GF left the house July 27th. It boils down to bruising on his forehead and a bruise on his bum in June. A bruise on April the 19th, hard to make out. Next day he was seen by 2 social workers. June 16th, extensive bruise on his forehead, seen by family. June 30th, no problem, taking him to the eye doctor with bruises. Honestly, how did she say all that with a straight face? My son, honest to God, he never had a bruise. I can't remember him ever, when he was a baby, having even one bruise. Even when he was toddling. Now, I think I've said before, I've got a nephew, their child was always falling over because he was reckless and he would always, fall down the stairs. If there was something he could fall off, he would fall off it. And practically every photo of him when he was about, 2, I suppose, between, as he was learning to walk, and he did have a bruise on his forehead. Sorry, I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's true. And they were questioned once at the hospital. But he would have one bruise at a time. It wasn't that. I think the thing with Preston that is standing out is a cluster of bruises all in one place on the head. A cluster of bruises. Is that common? I don't think it is. Anyway, she says it's double standard to say the defendant should have been noticed when professionals didn't notice. He has no experience with babies or expertise in bruising. If you'd seen the bruise on Preston's bottom, would you think it was a bite mark? Well, I wonder, because we haven't seen that photo. After a 4-month period, there are a handful of bruises where Preston was seen by professionals. It was reported, and Preston was noted to bruise easily. He did not die of bruising, he died of something very different. But what do they think he died of then? Then she addresses the 111 call on May 11th. Lots was made of it. The tone was deeply suggestive for what? Nothing. That's men worried about their child. Took him to Mr. Varley's mother's, and you have an agreed fact that none of the callbacks connected. On the moment, GF wasn't there. She refers the jury to the messages. She says there had been a petulant series of answers in the messages where Jamie said, no, he's watching TV. And she suggests that GF asked why he wasn't in bed or something similar. There was nothing suspicious about the hospital admission on June the 30th, Miss White says. It's been painful for days. Please watch the video of Preston and see how he presents. 3 medics said it was a common injury. Why wouldn't they question it on a child who had already presented with bruises? Yeah, why indeed, actually. Even if the defendant saw Mr. Varley snap and injure Preston, how would this enable him to foresee upper airway obstruction? We don't actually know that it was Varley who snapped. It could have been GF. In reference to Preston being naked at home, Miss White says there are obvious and innocent reasons, and children quite like it. The jury knows this as parents, she says. But the thing is, it's not any one of these things, is it? It's the combination of all of them that makes it suspicious. Speaking about the alleged SEX assault July 23rd, Miss White says the prosecution were casual with their words. There is no evidence of the defendant being SEX interested in Preston. The DNA evidence does not demonstrate SEX abuse. In his interview, GF said Preston used to be a bit of a dribbler before he had even seen any evidence. The questioning lacked any specifics or detail. It was one big innuendo. If you are accusing someone of SEX assault, you need to put to them what they've done. So Mr. GF is charged with a really shocking offence that requires a full and frank analysis of the evidence, she says. And Miss White questions what exactly the defendants are accused of. She puts forward a theory about the nature of the alleged assault. Really, she says, if the prosecution cannot put forward a clear case, you cannot convict them. And then she says that Preston should not have been left over the bars of the cart, but when GF saw him, he did not have blue lips. He trusted Mr. Varley to lie him down. He said he trusted him to do that. Remember, he said he was making a roast dinner. He only went there for a couple of seconds. Even if you think a photo of Preston's bottom 4 days before he died should have alerted Mr. GF, it wasn't injuries to his bottom that killed him. That's what she's saying, like, it doesn't matter about the injuries on the bottom because that wasn't what killed him. This does not point to upper airway obstruction. No, but it all paints a picture, doesn't it? Anyway, she said Preston was a highly visible child throughout the 4 months. GF was at work during the key moments. Key videos were not shared with. The video of Preston alone in the bath. GF only saw 30 seconds of it at the police station. The first time he saw all 14 minutes of it was when it was played in court. Well, if you believe that, I've got a tin of tartan paint I can sell you. There is no evidence of any of Varley's comments shed concern about his state of mind. So she says, I didn't question, GF said, I didn't question Varley's devotion. Now I feel as if Preston's life was an iceberg with things under the water I didn't know about. That's what he said. To this day, I don't know what happened. I thought from 28th of July, cause of death was unascertained. I feel as if information, videos and pictures I wasn't aware of have prevented me from protecting Preston. So, Mike shows a photo of Dave. She also refers to a petulant message from Varley on June the 15th. Your child is ill again. I mean, I think we can all agree that Varley is very petulant. GF replied, I'm on my way back, beautiful. I love you both very much, as long as he is safe. He was always ill, this child, wasn't he? That was Varley trying to get his attention. I'm on my way back, beautiful. Honestly, sometimes I just think no wonder poor little Preston was always vomiting. Because if that's the way they spoke to each other, got one being nasty to the other one and then him answering him, I'm on my way back, beautiful. I love you both very much. Miss White says this was the time the prosecution say he was equipped with knowledge that Preston was at risk, but this message shows his true nature, false as FUCK. And that concludes is the defence for John Gia, and the summing up begins on Thursday. So they're not sitting tomorrow. Let's put a picture of Preston back up. Get this. Oh, it makes me feel sick. No, I say no wonder Preston was sick all the time. Like, oh, see you later, beautiful. Yeah, whatever. So, Mr. Justice Turner, the judge, said he will now have to remind the jury of the evidence in his summing up, and he will begin this on Thursday. Yeah, it will resume on Thursday, June the 11th, with Mr. Justice Turner's summing up to the jury. And I will be there. Well, I won't be there, sadly. I'd like to be there. I would love to have been at the court. But I will be here telling you what the judge sums up. Yeah. Poor little Preston. Anyway, okay, I'm going now. Take care of yourselves. Thank you for caring a bit about this beautiful little boy. Let's hope the jury come to the right verdict. See you really soon in the next video. Till then, may your God go with you. Bye.